Welcome back to the poker vlog. This is episode number 329. For this one, we're in Bobby's room at Bellagio playing 100-100, getting some high stakes revenge. Before we get started, I've got a couple things I want to talk to you guys about. The first is that I got first place in the $5,000 buy-in high roller during the Lodge Championship Series. It wasn't a large field. It was a 28 entry tournament, but I got first for $59,634 for my first ever outright poker tournament win and my first ever no limit one. So I was very, very excited about that. And I mentioned to you guys before that I have this 100K free roll on ClubWPTGold.com. I'm adding everything I just won at the Lodge to this free roll. So it's now increasing to $159,634 for the free roll. I'm just incredibly excited to give that to you guys. I'm personally on the hook for it, which is wild. But I just want to say, thanks to everybody who supported me. And from you guys watching, I've had a ton of cool opportunities with WPT, with the Lodge, and various other things. So I'm appreciative of just being in the spot that I'm in, and this is a way to give back. I have more information in the description box below, but the way to qualify for this event is sign up to ClubWPTGold.com using promo Brad. If you did it in the past, then you're set on that requirement. The other requirement is to purchase at least $19.99 worth of gold coins. This will come with 20 sweeps coins. The sweeps coins are redeemable for cash at 1-to-1. So I've been playing a ton on the site in the sweeps coins games. I've been playing 1-2-4 and 2-4-8. The site is as soft as it gets, and that's typically the case when sites first open, but especially now that there's one of this caliber in the US for US players. This is going to be the biggest promotion that I might ever be a part of. And there are a couple cool things. If you just satisfy those minimal requirements, you'll start out with 2,000 in chips for that March 25th free roll. But for every 1,000 hands you play in the SC games, you'll receive 5,000 in chips up to a maximum of 100,000 starting stack. So if you're playing on the site a lot, you're going to be rewarded. Again, I have more information in the description box below. I'm going to be live streaming the whole tournament, and it's going to be a ton of fun. I hope to see you guys on there. And yeah, that's it. I guess let's go ahead and get started with the episode. Today we're at Bellagio to play the 100-100 game with a $100 big blind ante. It's the biggest game in Las Vegas and widely considered to be the most profitable because it's reserved and the players who are a tier or two above me are rarely allowed in. It's been a year since I've gotten the invitation to sit in it, so despite getting torched in the previous 2 high-stakes sessions I played, in my head not quite being where I'd like it to be to play for tens of thousands of dollars, I accepted without hesitation. Otherwise, we run the risk of not getting invited again. I get $20,000 in chips at the cage initially. We've got the chance to get the $57,000 back that we lost in the previous 2 vlogs. Or we might add another 50 or more to the deficit. We're in Legends Room once again with our work cut out for us. Before the cards are dealt, we draw the 4 seed and add on for 5,000 more to be in for 25,000 total. We need to book a win for confidence and morale purposes. Play begins at 10 a.m. Right away, we're dealt 9-8 suited on the button. Under the gun +1 raises to 300. The hijack calls. We've got a hand with a lot of potential that we want to see a flop with in position. I call. The small blind and big blind call. We're going 5 ways to the flop. The dealer puts out King 8-3 with 2 clubs. We've got middle pair and a flush draw. It's a terrific way to kick things off. The small blind and big blind check. The initial pre-flop raiser isn't deterred by the fact that he has 4 opponents. He bets 1,000. We have to give this bet a lot of credit because betting into 4 players as a bluff isn't something done too frequently, and under the gun +1 isn't that wild. The hijack folds. When we're up against a narrow range of strong combos, we don't have to raise. We're in position with a hand that's likely to improve. There's no need to raise as a bluff or for protection. I'm more than happy to see additional cards rather than try and take it down on this street. I call with plans of pumping money in once we improve instead of before. The small blind and big blind fold. It's down to heads up. The turn is the 4 of hearts. It's a blank. Under the gun +1 checks. I've seen him bet flop and check turn a lot with top pair when we played 25-50 together. Again, there are a lot of cards that can help us improve, so seeing a free card doesn't hurt us. I check back to ensure that we're able to get to the river. The dealer puts out the ace of hearts, which is an awful card. We brick our draw, we're downgraded to third pair, and we lose the lead to all ace high hands. Under the gun +1 knows that this is a better card for him than it is for us. He bets 2200. Could have a number of combos containing an ace, including ace king, aces, and ace x of clubs or spades. I'm not going to hero him. I fold, being disappointed that right away we're down 4 figures. If my struggles to make big hands better than one pair continue, this is going to be an expensive day. Almost an hour into the session, we're dealt pocket kings under the gun +2. I raised to 300. The neighbor on our left 3-bets to 1100. We raised some early position 9-handed, and immediate 3-bet isn't something our opponent would have done without a strong hand very often, because we expect the middle position player to have mostly hands in the very top left corner range charts, and we're pretty deep. We can flat out with kings a good chunk of the time. But with the 7-deuce game being onto the table, a lot of 3-bets are also done with the worst hand in poker. I'm going to 4-bet for value at a slightly higher frequency, especially from out of position. I 4-bet to 3800. The opponent doesn't muck his cards right away like I anticipated if he was 3-betting us light. He's taken his time to contemplate how to proceed. If he flats, this could be uncomfortable playing a huge pot out of position, but I'd be okay with it. The stack to pot ratio wouldn't be too large. When that's the case, it's pretty easy to navigate if the board comes out with low cards. The middle position player folds. We win 1400 without much trouble. It isn't a huge win, but seeing chips come our direction is always a positive outcome that helps us settle the nerves. Next, we're dealt ace-jack offsuit in the small blind. The hijack raises to 300. This is the same opponent who we bricked our draw against when we had 9-8 of clubs. I call for 200 more. We're heads up out of position. The flop comes king 10-6 rainbow. We've gotten over with a Broadway draw. We're never going to lead on this flop. I check to the pre-flop aggressor. 2 Broadway cards out there is better for his range than it is for ours. He leans into the range advantage, making a half pot bet of 400. We're not going to be check raising at a high frequency. Our hand does okay when we put it into the call bin. We're going to see at least one more card. I call with hopes of drilling the gutter. The turn is the 9 of clubs, which is much better for us in general. We'll have plenty of straight draw combos that improved, and we can lead on this turn occasionally. Instead, I check. The 9 of clubs is scary for the hijack. He checks back. I like seeing that. He probably has one pair or maybe no pair like us. The river is the 5 of clubs. We brick our draw, but the backdoor flush gets there. We're holding the ace of clubs, and we'll have a lot of flushes and straights that we'd play this way. We have removal of all sorts of strong hands. The opponent likely won't have better than one pair often. It's time to turn our hand into a bluff. I make an overbet at 2,000 to represent straights and flushes. Hands as strong as ace-king are supposed to fold the majority of the time to our sizing. The hijack can't get away though. He calls. We have to show that we got caught trying to bust a move. We reveal our ace high. It's no good. The hijack has king 8 of hearts. I told you earlier that he likes to check for pot control with top pair on the turn. It pays off for him in this instance. As a side note, king 8 is actually a much better hand to call our river bet with than ace king because king 8 has removal of straight combos that we're representing. I like how we played the hand, but it doesn't work out for us. We're down over 5,000 at the moment. There's a dealer change before we pick up king-jack offsuit in a bomb pot. All 9 players at the table put in $300 each, and we go straight to a flop. We're in middle position. The flop comes king-queen 9 with 2 spades. We've got top pair and a straight draw. When we have 8 opponents with uncapped ranges, top pair isn't something that we're going to get too excited about, but with a lot of money in the middle and removal to the straight, we need to bet to give ourselves a chance to win without allowing everyone to see a free card and potentially improve to beat us. I bet 1,000. The action gets to the hijack. He has a devious look on his face as he considers his options. He's not going to call our bet. He raises to 3,500. Already, this puts us in a tough spot because we could be drawing near dead if this is a legitimate raise done with a value hand. The small blind makes things more interesting. By coming in out of nowhere and cold calling the raise, there's a good chance the small blind has us beat, but if he had a straight, he might have re-raised for protection from the flush draw. I don't think that he has the nuts, particularly because we have removal for it. Our hand is kind of an interesting one to now turn into a bluff to represent either a straight, set, or 2 pair. It's just too dangerous though. I'm trying to make fewer unnecessary plays that are costly when they don't work out. I fold, knowing one or both players could have us beat. Even when king-jack is ahead, we have to worry about more spades coming out and playing from out of position. It's not worth it. We make things simpler and avoid having to make potentially difficult decisions on future streets. The turn is the 4 of clubs, which is a complete blank. I'm happy it's not a 10. The small blind checks. Whether the hijack has something that he can bet for value or only has a semi-bluff of some sort, he can apply a lot of pressure knowing the small blind almost definitely doesn't have the nuts after he cold called the raise rather than re-raise himself. The hijack puts in a massive overbet jam for 28,000. It's 2.5 times the size of the pot. Small blind folds. The hijack shows 7 deuce of spades for the semi-bluff. He wins the 5 figures in the middle, and on top of that, everyone at the table has to give him $300. This isn't the start that I envisioned. I'm down 9,000, but I'm okay with my decision so far. After adding on, we're dealt pocket nines under the gun +1. Under the gun raises to 300. He's one of the weaker players at the table, even though everyone's pretty decent. We can split between calling or 3-betting. I'd like to isolate. I 3-bet to 900 in order to either win or play a larger pot in position against the opponent. Under the gun calls, we're heads up, seeing a flop. I haven't made a set in several high stakes sessions. This would be a good time to drill one. The flop comes ace-6-3 with 2 hearts. We don't improve. Under the gun checks. Even though we don't have a great hand at the moment, we're going to bet a decent percentage of the time with nines because there are a few good possible outcomes. I make a small bet of 700. We'll have plenty of top pair combos after 3-betting pre-flop, so if the opponent has hands like jacks or tens, especially with no heart, he'll often be happy to let those go. Also, if the opponent folds unpaired combos containing 2 overs, that's a good result for us as well. Under the gun calls, which is a bit worrisome. Now we have to hope that he has a flush draw or some worse pair. The turn is the deuce of spades. It's mostly a blank except 5-4 gets there. Under the gun checks. We want to get to showdown with our nines at this point. I check back to see the river. The dealer puts out the 3 of clubs pairing the board. It's unclear whether we're best or not. Under the gun is going to at least represent a hand stronger than ours with a bet of 2,000. He wouldn't do this with a hand like queens, jacks, or tens. He's saying that he has at least an ace. He could also be turning missed flush draws into a bluff, like king jack, queen 10, jack 10, and 10-9 of hearts. I call. There's no bluff this time. If the opponent has ace 10 of clubs like he was representing, I lose a couple thousand on the end. We're supposed to call about half the time with black 9 since we unblock all the combos that the opponent is supposed to bluff with. Still, it's another somewhat frustrating one that goes the other way. I haven't been able to string wins together. I know things have to turn around, but in the meantime, not making big hands and not being able to bet for value is getting a bit painful. The table agrees to play a round of the stand-up game when we pick up pocket queens in the cutoff. This is the situation that we dream about. Under the gun +1 raises to 300. The opponent is Ralph Wong. He's been a high-stakes cash game crusher for a long time. He also helps organize the game. I played with him quite a bit. I 3-bet to 1100. When we're playing the stand-up game, I tend to use larger sizings whether I've got a big hand like right now or when I'm bluffing. Winning any pot is good for us so that we can avoid having to pay each player at the table $300. Larger bet sizes disincentivizes opponents from getting involved or punishes them when they do and we show up at the top of our range. Small blind wants his seat back. He cold 4-bets to 3,300. There's no way we're folding when everyone has extra motivation to play aggressively. Things heat up even more when the action's back on under the gun +1. He's not folding either. He 5-bets to 7,000. We've got the 3rd best hand in poker with 17,000 in front of us, facing an absurd amount of aggression. This isn't a fist pump rip. One or both opponents could have us beat. The small blind is the same player who ripped it for 28,000 with 7 deuce of spades earlier in the bomb pot. He's capable of 4-betting light when he needs to. I'm giving a lot more credit to this 5-bet, but queens is just too good to lay down for less than 200 big blinds when the stand-up game's on. We rip it for 17,000 total. Our decision's been made. What happens next is out of our hands. The small blind's 4-bet was all bark and no bite. He folds. Ralph indicates that he has a strong hand, but he doesn't snap call, so I'm feeling much more confident that we're either ahead or flipping against ace-king. We get a count of my chips to confirm that it's 17,000 total. Ralph makes the call. We're going to be playing an all-in pot of almost $40,000.
What, twice?
It's a few.
Twice.
We're running it 2 times against ace-king offsuit. The first run out will determine which one of us gets to win the seat back for the stand-up game, so we really want to at least win that one, especially because then we get to free roll the second run out. My heart's racing as we're about to play a pot bigger than my bankroll when I first moved out to Vegas. The flop comes 10-4-3 with 2 clubs. The opponent has some backdoor draws, but this is a good one for us considering we didn't improve. It's a great start to help us get our seat back and potentially scoop a huge all-in. If I knew this flop was coming, I'd have just run it once. The turn is the ace of spades, completely turning everything around with the flip of a card. We're down to 2 outs if we want to win the first half of the pot and avoid losing the stand-up game. The river is the 9 of diamonds, ending the first run out, my hopes of scooping the pot, and my hopes of getting out of the stand-up game. This was a brutal turn card that completely wrecks me. The second flop comes 9-6-3 with 2 spades. Again, it starts out safe, but we have to fade 2 overs with 2 more cards to come. The turn is the 6 of clubs pairing the board. I'm feeling a lot better now that we have a solid shot at winning at least half the pot, but I'm not taking my chips back just yet. The river is the 8 of clubs. We get to breathe again, winning on the second run out. Thankfully, Ralph chose to run it twice. If we just ran it once, it would have been much more devastating. Since a small blind cold 4-bet, Ralph and I chopped his money and win almost $2,000 each. The only difference is Ralph wins a seat back and I'm still standing, in need of winning a pot, or else I have to pay out $2,400 to the table. A few hands later, we're dealt pocket sixes after straddling from 200 from under the gun. I'm one of only 3 players left who's still standing. Under the gun +1 limps in. He's one of the other 2 opponents out of his seat. Under the gun +2 raises to 900. He's seated but still capable of raising light to play stand-up game defense. A player in middle position calls. The only other player out of his chair puts in a 3-bet to 5,000. I get the sense that this opponent prides himself on not losing the stand-up game. Right before this, he just got caught bluffing $15,000 to earn his seat back, but it didn't work out for him. I'm not putting a lot of stock into his 3-bet in this instance. Pocket sixes might be the best hand, but I don't like any of my options. If I fold and let the small blind win, he takes a seat, then I'll be heads up in the stand-up game with the player on our direct left, which is a nightmare because he'll have a massive advantage with position on us. I don't want to call and leave myself with about a pot-sized bet left in our stack. My image is solid. If we rip it, I think we'll win $7,400 that's already in the middle a large chunk of the time. We might even be able to get hands like 8s, 9s, or 10s to fold. Plus, we'll get a ton of high card combinations to fold that have equity. Even if the opponent calls, we'll have ace king a lot that we'll be flipping with again. I feel like shipping it is the right play given the dynamics of the table consisting of who my opponents are, their incentives to get involved, and my table image. But it's hard to muster up the courage to cold 4-bet jam for $18,000. F*** it, I'm going for it.
All in.
We just ripped it for $18,000 as a bluff, and we really don't want to get called. Under the gun +1 folds. We fade the possibility of him open limping with a monster at least. Under the gun +2 folds. He doesn't have a hand at the top of his range. He was probably trying to isolate the limper. The middle position player folds. He's who I was least worried about since he didn't have a hand strong enough to 3-bet himself. The action's back on the small blind, who doesn't make a decision right away. He wants a count to know exactly how much more it is for him to call.
18 or
Yeah.
That's deuce for sure chapping. So you're for sure chapping. Cool. Oh, you might have been.
2 times. 2 times.
Sorry, I bet you're for sure
Pair?
chapping, I thought.
Queens
It could have
Yeah.
been.
We ran into the worst case scenario. We turn over our 6s and we're indeed up against pocket queens rather than 2 overs like I hoped once we got called. The opponent chooses to run it twice. It's another pot of nearly $40,000, but we've gotten it in way worse than a flip. I mentioned before that I haven't hit a set in several sessions. It'd be a good time to hit one now, preferably on the first run out so that we can take our seat. The flop comes King 6 Deuce Rainbow. It's a dream flop that might have just bailed us out in multiple ways. We can possibly win half the pot and take our seat back. The turn is the 8 of hearts. As long as there's no queen on the river, we'll be able to relax mentally and physically. The river is the deuce of spades, giving us a full house. We get to return to our seat and avoid getting stacked, which is all I really wanted once I saw what we were up against. It's a bit too much to ask to crack queens with 6s twice in a $38,000 pot when there's only one more 6 remaining. The second flop comes 10-9-5 rainbow. There's not a lot of hope for us, but that's okay. The turn is the 8 of spades, giving us a straight draw. We can hit either a 6 or 7 now. The river's the jack of hearts. We don't win at all. I actually feel a little bad when I get it in with the worst of it and suck out. That's not how I typically want to do things. I'll take getting lucky occasionally though, especially after running into quads 3 times and the nuts over and over the last time I was in this room. The very next hand we look down at pocket 7s in the big blind while the straddle's on. We have a seated view, which I have a newfound appreciation for. The stand-up game is down to heads up with 2 players that I'm sandwiched between. The button raises to 900. He's the opponent from the last hand who's still standing. The straddler is the other player standing. We can call or 3-bet. I call for 800 more, hoping that we'll be able to make it to the flop and that the under the gun straddler doesn't get out of line. Luckily, he doesn't have a hand that he wants to get aggressive with. We take our pocket pair to the flop, heads up, out of position with someone who needs to win a pot. The flop comes Jack 9-7 with 2 hearts. For the second hand in a row, we flop a set. This board is a little scarier because there are all sorts of draws. I check. The button is going to have an incredibly wide range when he opens anyway from late position, but this hand, he was forced to open even wider to make sure that the straddler didn't get a walk, which would have ended the stand-up game and forced the button to pay out $2,400. The button knows that we'll connect frequently on this flop. He checks back. The turn is the ace of hearts. An overcard comes out that'll generally be better for the pre-flop aggressor. I check once more to set the trap and make the button think that I'm weak. After seeing 2 checks, the button can't help himself. He bets $1,500. He probably would have c-bet on the flop with a flush draw or any other strong hand, so I'm not concerned about being up against a flush, straight, or set. We should be best. If not, we'll have outs. I check raise to $4,500. This is one of the rare instances I'll check twice, then put in a raise. A large percentage of the time when people do this, it's done as a bluff after they pick up a draw of some sort. The button is trying to piece our story together. The wheels are turning. He's thinking about what hands we'd play this way. He's wondering if there's still an avenue for him to win so that he can end the stand-up game. Ultimately, he folds. I'm okay with it.
Sets in back-to-back hands.
After being on a set drought for a long time, we hit 2 of them, 1 shuffle apart. Even though I'm down $12,500, I'm feeling energized like I'm pre-rolling this session after hitting the 6. I'm a new man. We need to make the most of our session from here though. We pick up King 10 offsuit in the big blind. The small blind raises to $400. Blind versus blind, we've got a strong enough hand to take it to the flop in position. I call for $300 more. We're heads up, looking to book a damn win for the first time in a while. The flop comes 10-10-8 with 2 diamonds. We've got trips. All of a sudden, we're hitting flops. The next step is to get some value. Small blind checks. He may not have much, especially when we've got everything. We've got to try to extract something out of him, though. I bet $400. Small blind might have a piece, and hopefully that piece gets him into trouble. He calls. 2 low non-diamond cards on the turn and river would be incredible. The turn is the Jack of spades, completing straight draws and improving pocket jacks and Jack 10 to have us beat. Small blind checks. There's still a number of flush draws that we're beating and a variety of other hands that improved, like Jack 9 and Queen Jack or Jack X of diamonds that we're beating and can get value from. We're not always going to be up against the nuts. I bet $800 for value and protection. The small blind is not a believer. He decides it's too soon to let go. He calls. Like a lot of my redneck family members in the summertime, we're taking our trips to the river. The dealer puts out the 6 of clubs, it's a blank, no new straights get there, and the flush draw misses. My sense from the small blind is that he has something with value, but we've got him beat. He leads for $900. It appears that he's naming his price with some sort of blocker bet. Maybe he has ace-8 suited, Jack 9, Jack 8, Queen Jack, or some other combo that he wants to get to showdown with without having to get charged the maximum. In some cases, people will put out a fake blocker bet with a hand close to the nuts to induce a raise. Usually, they'll go with a smaller size than this though. 900 really feels like an amount that he wants to get to showdown with. Against some players, I may flat because they'll do this with hands as strong as a straight. I'm not as worried with this opponent. I'm confident in my read that we've got him beat. I raised to 3,000. We don't get too many opportunities to hit hands this strong. When we do, we need to squeeze every ounce out that we can. Often the opponent will fold. That's okay. But not this time. The opponent calls. No re-raise is a good sign. We turn over our trip 10s. The small blind is upset with himself for betting and calling our raise as he returns his cards face down to the dealer. We win a big blind versus blind pot, making the most of the situation. This win certainly helps boost the confidence. An hour being card dead goes by before we're dealt pocket 8s onto the gun. I raise to 300. A lot of people's fold buttons are broken today. The player in middle position, the small blind, and the big blind all call. We're going 4 ways to the flop. It comes 7-7-4 rainbow. We've got an overpair, but there are a lot of opponents. The small blind and big blind will both have a number of 7s in their range as well. Checks to us. I don't want to get check raised and have no idea where we're at the remainder of the hand unless we hit an 8. I check, not loving that option too much either. The player in middle position bets 700. I didn't see a bet from him coming because he's not going to have many 7s at all, maybe just ace-7 suited and 8-7 suited sometimes. More likely he has a small or medium pocket pair. The small blind folds, the big blind calls. He could certainly have trips, but maybe he just has a 4 or a straight draw that he wants to see one more card with. I call. We slightly under-repped our hand with a check call. 3 of us are seeing the turn. The dealer puts out the Jack of diamonds. It's pretty much a blank because it doesn't connect with the low flop. The big blind checks. I check. if the middle position player bets and the big blind calls, we can get out at this juncture. The middle position player checks back, so he probably just took a stab with a medium strength or weak hand on the flop with something like 6s or 5s, or maybe even worse. The river is the 3 of clubs, 6-5 makes a straight, pocket 3s improve as well. The big blind is the same opponent we played the king 10 offsuit hand against when he led river and called our raise with worse. He bets 1200 this time on the river. He's representing trips or better. He might have check raised on the flop with trip 7s, although it was relatively dry, so it's not impossible that he slow played trips or a full house. It just seems a bit convenient for him to bet here after only calling on the flop and everyone checking on the turn. He could have hands like 6-4, 5-4, 4-3, and 5-3. He's turning into a bluff, maybe some 8-5 and 8-6 as well, but we've got removal to those. I call. The middle position player folds quickly. He must not have had much. The big blind has 10-7 offsuit. We lose to trips. In hindsight, folding would have been the appropriate play, particularly because the 7 deuce game is on, and I have an opponent behind me. Man, I hate pocket 8s. We pick up pocket 8s in the cutoff, it's less than an orbit later. The dude who just beat us with trips raises to 300 from the hijack. Revenge is not an option, it's mandatory. I 3-bet to 900. No one's going to make it to the flop with 10-7 offsuit this hand. The hijack isn't quitting though. He calls. We're heads up in position. The flop comes king 5 with 2 diamonds. We would have gotten 4-bet by a lot of higher pocket pairs than ours, so as long as we're not up against trip kings, we'll have the best hand a lot of the time. The hijack checks. We'll have plenty of kings in our range as the 3-better. We're going to c-bet 100% of the time in this situation. I down bet to 700. When the opponent flop trips against us last hand, he slow played it. This hand, he check raises to 2300 right out of the gate. I'm caught off guard and not fully buying his story. He's not going to have a ton of king x suited combos when 2 of the kings are accounted for. He probably would have 4-bet with ace king pre-flop. The best hand that I really have is king queen suited or pocket 5s, but he probably traps with pocket 5s. We can't fold 8s when we're in position and have a backdoor flush draw. I call for 1600 more. It's a large pot. We don't have a monster. It's getting kind of dicey. The turn is the 6 of clubs, it's a blank. Our call might have terrified the hijack into a freeze state. He slows down and checks. He could have check raised us on the flop with a flush draw or maybe some other pair that we're beating if he wanted to see where he was at. I'd like to get to showdown cheaply, but I take a creative approach in order to accomplish that. I bet 1700, it's about a quarter of the pot. I doubt the opponent has trips, but if he does, he might just call again because we could easily have ace king. If he has a flush draw, we're at least able to charge him, but this is the last of the money that I plan to put in. I'm going to check back all rivers no matter what. I like putting out the small bet because if we check, it gives the opponent an opportunity to hit a flush for free or potentially turn a hand into a bluff that'll put us in a very tough spot if he bets big. Our bet here simplifies things and will hopefully allow us to get to showdown for only 1700. Our small wager is convincing enough. The hijack folds. We win a few thousand, showing some grit and tenacity. The hijack would later tell me that he had 7 deuce and was trying to make a move on the flop. We capitalize on the situation to get the revenge that we were seeking. I'm feeling more comfortable in the game, but I'm not stringing wins together. After a lull, I add on for 20,000 more to cover the couple players who I think that I've got an edge against. I'm in for 56,000 total with a lot of catching up to do. In this one, we're dealt 4-3 suited on the button. The hijack raises to 300. It's my buddy Ralph. We're at the bottom of our calling range, but it's a fun hand to play. If we can make a strong hand like trips, it'll be well concealed. I call to see a flop in position. We're heads up. The flop comes 9-8-4 rainbow. It's a type of flop that'll typically connect well with our pre-flop calling range. We'll have sets and lots of strong straight draws. The hijack checks. You could just have 2 overs. I'd like to give ourselves a little protection while we take control of the pot. I bet 300. It's a reasonable amount for the opponent. He's not giving up for that price. He calls, which he still might do with some high card hands, especially if he has backdoor draws. The turn is the ace of hearts. It's a very bad card for us. The hijack checks. If he floated us with something like ace 10 or ace jack suited, or even ace king, we're not going to be able to bluff him off the top pair. I check back and wave the white flag. The river is the 3 of clubs, giving us a completely hidden 2 pair. Let's take that flag right back. The hijack checks. When check calls flop, it checks through on the turn, and he checks the river. He's mostly only going to have 1 pair at best. We can bet big for value to target those aces that he might have floated us with on the flop, or any other 1 pair hand that he could have. I make a pot size bet of 1500. This should look incredibly odd. There aren't a ton of 2 pair or better hands that we play this way, which is what we're representing on the river. Ralph's trying to figure out what we could possibly have because our story's bizarre. It looks like we could be trying to buy the pot with a busted straight draw or something terrible. Ralph needs to see it. He calls. We reveal our river 2 pair. It turns out that we needed to hit it. Ralph lets you guys know for the vlog that he has a 4 as well. He must have had us outkicked, but maybe it would have been a chop had the river been a high card, since we obviously weren't up against ace 4. We might have just been up against 5-4 or 6-4 suited. It's a fun run out that allows us to win a nice chunk. We're still nowhere near the even mark though. Next we're dealt 7 deuce offsuit on the button. Onto the gun raises to 300. His name's Stu. Stu is absolutely crushing it today after already winning a couple of gigantic pots. He's got 95,000 in front of him. Onto the gun +1 calls. If we win with 7 deuce, we'll get 300 from each player at the table. There are 6 opponents at the moment, so we'll get an extra 1,800. I 3-bet to 1,400. 3-betting after the first 2 players to act have shown interest is something that I won't be doing light very often. I'll even flat big pairs occasionally. Stu folds. He's who I was most concerned about. Onto the gun +1 folds as well. We win with 7 deuce for the first time today. Having the 7 deuce game on has mostly benefited us. We caught someone making a move earlier with it, and now we get one through to win a couple thousand.
A little bit, sorry. A little bit, you get your face up when you zoom in.
This is the man that we 3-bet bluffed. We completely embarrass him, although it's hard to embarrass a guy who's up more money today than I'm in for. It's a good group of dudes who play this game. Everyone has fun with each other, even when we're stuck 5 figures, which is pretty much exactly how much I'm stuck. About an hour later, we pick up 7 deuce offsuit again. We've even got the same suits. This time we're on the button. All we need to do is get the blinds to fold, and then we collect bonus money from everyone. I raised to 300. The big blind calls to spoil our plan. Looks like we're gonna have to win this one post-flop. We're heads up. The flop comes Jack 6-5 with 2 diamonds. We've got nothing except backdoor draws. The big blind checks. We're going to be betting until we're given a reason not to. I bet 500 to induce a fold. We really don't want to get any resistance, otherwise I might go into full loco mode, blasting away. It's fun when it works, but it's excruciating when it doesn't. The big blind calls. Uh-oh. We might morph into Donkey Kong, hurling barrels left and right. The turn is the 4 diamonds, giving us an open-ended straight draw and a flush draw. We've got key removal for both. The big blind checks. If he doesn't have a set or better, he's not going to like what we're cooking up. I bet 2,000. We don't have to sweat this one. The big blind folds immediately. We win with 7 deuce for the second time. We didn't get dealt the starting hand at all the first few hours, but we're benefiting from picking it up on the back 9. 6 players give us $300 each one more time. We're digging ourselves out of the hole, using the worst hand in poker as a shovel. In this one, we're dealt pocket 7s in the small blind. The hijack gets things started with a raise to 300. We might have used up all of our set power in those back-to-back hands earlier, but there's no way to be certain. I call for 200 more to see a flop. We're heads up out of position. The flop comes 7-6-5 with 2 hearts. We smash our 3rd set of the day. I check to the pre-flop aggressor. If he bets, we're not going to be slow playing with all the draws out there. The hijack comes through and bets 600. I wasn't expecting him to go this large because this flop hits our range hard, but we're sticking to the plan. We want to try to get to a point where we're playing for all the money on the river if we get a clean run out. I raised to 2,000. If we're beat, we're going to potentially get stacked. The hijack isn't shying away from a little action. He calls. Maybe he'd still call and slow play with 9-8. I'm not worried about the other straight possibilities. It seems more likely he just has a draw or an overpair though. We need some blanks or for the board to pair. The turn is the deuce of clubs. I love seeing that, other than the fact that another flush draw is out there. I bet 5,000, putting out a flag chip. We're finally able to play a hand post-flop and go big for value. The opponent has caught me bluffing multiple times at different points over the last year, and even earlier today with ace-jack. Those hands might pay off right now and allow us to get called light. The hijack calls once again. The pot is ballooned to about $15,000. The opponent has around $25,000 total in his stack. We have him covered. We've got a lot riding on this river card, and we need it to be a blank. The dealer puts out the king of spades. Both flush draws miss. No additional straights aside from flopped ones get there. Given our hand, the board, and the action, this is a pretty big blank, except it has the benefit of potentially giving our opponent top pair if he's holding the king of hearts or clubs. If the hijack slow played the nuts and didn't pull the trigger on the flop or turn, his patience is about to pay off because we're going for it. The opponent folds pretty quickly to the shove. Maybe he just had a misdraw or an overpair that was downgraded on the river. I like the player and have a good relationship with him, so I send my cards his way face down so that he can see that he made the correct laydown. He's happy about it. I'm good with the outcome. We win a sizable pot to get right up to the edge of the even mark. We've got 55,000 in front of us, and remember, we're in for 56,000 total, meaning we've got a sliver left of unfinished business as the day's winding down. Almost 6 hours into the session, we're dealt King 10 offsuit in the big blind. Under the gun +1 raises to 300. The hijack calls, the small blind calls. We're closing the action for 200 more. I call as well. 4 of us are seeing the flop. It comes ace-7-4 rainbow. We totally whiff it. Maybe someone's slow playing a monster, but all players check. The turn is the queen of clubs, making things interesting. We pick up a Broadway draw and a fake flush draw. Small blind takes a stab for 500. This is the same dude who tried to bluff us earlier by check raising with 7 deuce. He has it in him to bluff here. I make a speculative call, not solely relying on hitting a straight. If a club comes, we're going to be putting the heat on. Under the gun +1 in the hijack fold. It's down to heads up. The river's the 9 of clubs. Of course, when you don't actually have a flush draw, you always hit it. It's not the best card for us, but it's perhaps the most fun because the fuse has been lit and it's time to blast away. The small blind isn't scared of the 3rd club. He bets 1,300 as if he likes it. Maybe this isn't as fun of a card as we thought if he has the real flush compared to our fake one. I actually wouldn't be entirely shocked if the opponent has 7 deuce once more. I raised to 4,000. Thanks for choosing the big river-sized dude because now we're going to absorb that 1,300 right into our stack. Well, maybe not. The opponent isn't quick to fold. 30 seconds goes by and the opponent is still thinking about looking us up. Finally, the opponent folds after making us sweat. We put in the raise with king high to win a substantial pot. It puts us over the even mark for the first time today. We were stuck piles at different points. Now we're completely out of the hole, stringing wins together at the end to avoid booking a 3rd straight high stakes loss. At 5 p.m., 7 hours after the session started, the game breaks. We added a little more to our profit before racking up close to $60,000. We end up only winning $2,660, which isn't a ton for this game, and it was pretty stressful, but it feels a hell of a lot better than walking out with another 5-figure loss. I still love playing poker, and I love being on the strip. I take a few minutes to walk outside and enjoy the fountains from up close. I haven't watched them for a long time. After a day like this one, it's nice to decompress, and this is the perfect way to do that. Every once in a while, it's good to pause and reflect. I know if the younger version of me could flash forward to this moment, he'd think it's awesome that we made it to this point, winning big pots in the highest stakes game at Bellagio. That's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe buttons. It helps out the channel a ton. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know in the comment section. I'm happy to get back to you. Don't forget to sign up to ClubWPTGold.com using promo BRAD to make yourself eligible for the free roll, which is now increased from 100,000 to 159,634. This is going to be something that's just such a cool event. It's going to take place March 25th. The time is to be determined, but if you signed up using promo BRAD and purchased $19.99 worth of gold coins, then you'll be eligible. That'll get you a starting stack of 2,000 in this free roll. And then for every 1,000 hands you play in the sweeps coins games, you'll receive 5,000 in chips up to a maximum of 100,000. So this is going to be really, really cool. And then I have a bunch of awesome poker vlogs coming up of high stakes sessions, and eventually this 5K win a couple weeks down the line. So I can't wait to share those with you. Be on the lookout for them, and hopefully I'll see you guys soon, either online or maybe at a meetup game or something. All right, good luck at the tables.